Chapter 1: The Multiple Meanings of Music for Children. There are 10 functions in music, and here are 4 that are very prominent in my life.
I'm trapped in a memory that won't come again, 'cause we're trapped apart, but you're still in my heart. Trapped in a memory that won't come again. Trapped in that moment when my heart's fluttering began.
I haven't slept a wink, I only think of our approaching tete-a-tete tonight at 8. I feel a combination of depression and elation. What a state to wait till 8. 3 more minutes, 2 more seconds, 10 more hours to go. In spite of all I've written, she may not be very smitten, and my hopes perhaps may all collapse kaput tonight at 8.
It takes so long to take the picture with the flash on.
Children's musical capabilities.
All children are musical. They quite naturally express themselves through singing, dancing, listening, and playing. Nearly all children have the ability to sing accurately in tune as well.
Music at the curricular core.
It is very important that children have good music programs in their schools. In my elementary school, my music program wasn't the best, and in my middle school, I didn't even have a music program. I was lucky because both my parents are musicians, and that's how I learned to be a musician. But not every kid has the opportunity to have parents who are musicians, and some of them, school will be the only way they can produce music and express themselves in music class.
Music for children in a changing society.
In a changing society, children can have so many hardships and struggles, and music class and music itself can be a way to get away from all the trouble that they're having in their lives at the moment, and just to focus on music in itself.
Chapter 2: From Theory to Practice in Teaching Music to Children. This chapter focused on the different theories of child development we as future music educators need to know. Stage and phase theories.
Stage and phase theories are theories about development of children that come into phases or stages. Some of the theorists who came up with stage theories are Jean Piaget, Jerome Bruner, Lawrence Sosniak, Gregory Bateson, and Catherine Ellis.
Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences.
Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory is very important for us to know as future music educators. His theory states that there are 8 different intelligences, meaning each student doesn't learn the same and is not the same, because students are smart in their own special way.
Learning modalities. First proposed by Walter Barb and Raymond Swassing, a theory of learning modalities submits that a learner processes information most efficiently through one of 3 sensory channels: kinesthetic, aural, or visual. A kinesthetic learner learns best when they are touching or feeling something. I am a kinesthetic learner, so I learn best when I am having hands-on experience with something. An aural learner learns best through listening. And a visual learner learns best when they are looking at something, either a video, an image, or just watching the teacher teach. Chapter 3: Methods of Teaching Music to Children. This chapter focused on different methods to teach children. I will be focusing on the Dalcroze, Kodály, and Orff methods. Emile Dalcroze was a Swiss musician who served as professor of solfège, harmony, and composition at the Geneva Conservatory. His pedagogy originated early in the 20th century as he experimented with approaches to ear training. The Dalcroze method of teaching children is very movement-based. Dalcroze uses eurythmics, which is a way to teach children musical concepts through movement. In the Dalcroze method, he uses fixed do, which is something that we don't tend to use nowadays, which means that C is always do. Although it is important to learn the Dalcroze method, very few teachers are trained in this pedagogy. Zoltan Kodály was a composer, ethnomusicologist, and advocate of music education for children. His method of teaching music incorporated inner hearing, which is being able to hear a piece or a note before producing it. Kodály believed that the use of good music is vital to the life of every single person. Kodály's method uses folk songs in order to teach music literacy and improvisation. Unlike Dalcroze, Kodály's method uses movable do, which means that do is the tonic of the scale. Carl Orff's method of teaching has 4 different components: literacy, exploration, improvisation, and imitation. When thinking of an Orff classroom, one typically thinks of the Orff xylophones. Xylophones are typically found in an Orff classroom because they are a great way to improvise and to explore one's own musical ability. Chapter 4: The Singing Child. The stages of singing.
The babbling stage is from the ages of 0 to 2. In this stage, the child can hear a pitch and then match the pitch after on a neutral syllable. I'm super tired because I didn't sleep well last night. I didn't sleep well last night. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, how I wonder what you are.
All the small things truth care, truth brings. I'll take one lift. You're right, best trip. Always, I know you'll be at my show.
Teaching note versus rote in singing.
Teaching children to sing by note is having them be able to read music and be able to perceive what the note is and sing that note. Singing by rote is teaching children music orally as opposed to writing it down. They hear it and then they'll sing back. Like Orff, it uses imitation.
Self-assessment is a great way to formatively assess singing. Try asking the students if the singing was in tune, if it was flat or sharp, if it was rhythmically alive, if it was relaxed and open or tense and tight. Ask them questions about their singing so that they can improve. A way to summatively assess a student's singing ability would be to record their singing progress by arranging for periodic recording sessions of students on a given song or exercise. Chapter 5: Pitch and the Child. Pitch percept versus concept.
The differences between pitch percept and pitch concept. Perception in pitch is when a student can listen to 2 different notes or 2 different songs and recognize that they are different in some way. They can't, however, recognize exactly why or how they are different. Pitch concept is when the student has the ability to state or to recognize what exactly is different between the two pieces or the two notes.
An example of a formative assessment regarding pitch would be to have the students use their finger to contour a melody and watch all the students and make sure that they understand what they are supposed to be doing. An example of a summative assessment regarding pitch would be to have children generate their own examples of a concept such as a scale and describe why it is a scale and use it creatively within a composition. Just having a child sing something to show you their understanding of pitch concepts is not a valid assessment tool. Chapter 6, The Moving Child. These next two videos will show the difference between creative movement and dance. Dalcroze Eurythmics, Teaching Musical Concepts Through Movement. A way to formatively assess students on movement would be to, in the case of action songs and singing games, ask them if they're rhythmically on time with the gestures, steps, and other means of physical movement. Also, in case of eurythmics, you can ask them if they are able to capture the musical feature in the movement, and if they are drawn to other musical features than the ones prescribed. In creative movement, you can ask them if they are able to move in a way that feels good to them, with thought given to the use of space, time, and energy in their own personal way, or if they are following someone else's ideas, because that is dance and not creative movement. And in the case of dance, you can ask them if they are following the sequence of movements required of the dance in proper order, rhythmically accurate time, and within the expressive style associated with the dance. An example of a summative assessment for dance would be to videotape the students dancing to one song and watching their progress, and then at the end of the year you can show them their final performance video. Chapter 7, Rhythm and the Child. Pulse and meter.
Some children understand the pulse and the beat and can sway along with it as toddlers, while others are still coming to terms with the feeling of the beat in the intermediate grades. Most children can maintain a steady beat by the age of 8 years old. The recurring pattern of stronger and weaker pulses is called meter. Children learn meter through both attentive listening and kinesthetic responses that follow the musical flow of stronger and weaker sounds.
Mnemonics. Mnemonics are rhythmic syllables that you can use to teach your students rhythm. For word chant, mnemonics are words that correspond with different rhythms. For Kodai, the word chant is ta-ti, ta-ti. And for Gordon, it is do-day, do-day. These are different ways that you can teach your students rhythm.
Polyrhythm is when you have two different rhythms that are happening simultaneously.
A formative assessment for rhythm would be to have children Clap and chant short 4-beat or 8-beat phrases from laminated cards or on a screen. Then if they're having trouble with a rhythm, it can be repeated and may later on emerge in full-bodied rhythmic lessons. A way to summatively assess a child's rhythm is to see how they express rhythmic patterns vocally, in body percussion, and on instruments. As a teacher, you could have small group assessments be done in class. Chapter 8, The Playing Child. Rhythmic skills are usually the first to emerge, but the muscular coordination essential to playing musical instruments may develop much later. It takes a while for children to develop the more sophisticated eye-hand coordination skills. One popular method to teaching musical instruments is the Suzuki method. The pedagogy of Shinichi Suzuki is based on the premise that all children are born musical. In the Suzuki method, the children begin early with listening at birth and lessons from around 2.5 years onward. Also, there is a delay of music reading until more musical skills and performance techniques have developed. One thing that is unique in the Suzuki method is that parents are involved in lessons and at-home practice. And there is excellent music literature that is used and developmentally appropriate for the child. One thing that I find very unique about Suzuki is that the form balances private lessons with group lessons, and group lessons are a great way for motivation and socialization. Also, Suzuki method is a lot about repeating, reviewing, and reinforcing the performance of previously learned music. And it accentuates self-development while de-emphasizing competition. Body percussion.
As I have shown through Dalcroze Eurythmics, body percussion is a great, simple, and cheap way to accompany oneself and to go from singing to singing with instruments.
The different kinds of instruments.
Other non-pitched percussion instruments include drums, claves, and maracas. Orff xylophones are a common pitched musical instrument in the classroom. Another common pitched musical instrument is the recorder. These two instruments are very simple to play, which makes them a perfect fit for your future music classroom.
Self-assessment is a great way to formatively evaluate and assess your students. You can ask them to listen to the tone quality of their instrument, listen to how accurate musically the performance is, and see if they are reading the rhythms and pitches correctly. A way to summatively assess a child's musical playing abilities is to put a piece of paper on the door with either scales or pieces that you want the child to play for you at the end of the year, and you will assess them on their capability of doing that and on their progress. Chapter 9, The Listening Child.
Deep listening is listening that demands that teachers use their abilities in analytical listening, conducting, performing, arranging, and communication to engage children in exploring music on more than a superficial level.
The 3 phases of deep listening. Attentive listening uses diagrams in which the teacher focuses the students on musical structures by highlighting points of musical interest in the piece. Engaged listening occurs when the learner is drawn into full participation in the music by tapping the beat, playing an ostinato, singing a melody, or performing a groove. Inactive listening involves the learner at even deeper levels, such as learning to perform a piece in style and reflecting the nuances of that work of music, whether from an oral or notated tradition. Children need to be prepared to listen. They should be prepared to know what the piece they're listening to is about or who it was composed by. When I did my first practicum, the teacher, Mr. DuPont, had his students listen to a piece in Korean. He explained to have them prepare for the listening assignment. He explained to them where Korea was and the culture of Korea. The next step is listen. Play the recording and check students' perceptions or feelings through class discussion. Next, you will play the music again and invite the students to actively participate through performing or moving in some way to the music. Throughout this sequence, discussion should take place. The discussion can address the music, portions of the music, the activities the children are doing, or their emotional response to the experiences or the music. Listen to the recording quietly again, just to notice familiar moments, expand insights into the music, and to reestablish the work as a whole. And step 6 is to extend the listening. This means you use the listening as a stimulus to have the children either compose music in similar forms, listen to other music by the same composer, or listen to music by other composers that have similar or contrasting characteristics. An example of a formative evaluation for listening would be to ask the children, "What do you hear?" Ask them what they hear and what they feel as they listen to the music. An example of a summative assessment in listening would be to have the children contour the music they hear or describe it in great detail. Another option for a summative assessment regarding listening would be to have the students kinesthetically respond to something that they hear in the music. Chapter 10, The Creating Child. Convergent versus divergent thinking.
Convergent thinking is what most children have in their other classes besides music. It is when there is exactly one right answer to a question. An example of this would be like a multiple choice test. There is one right question, unless the answer is all of the above, but it's still one circle. But divergent thinking is what we use in music, especially in improv and creativity. It's what makes it super creative. Divergent thinking is when there is not just one answer to a problem, where you can think of something in many different ways.
Children can be creative through exploring sounds an instrument or voice might make in terms of color, techniques, dynamics, pitch, duration, and texture. In the process of free exploration, children are building a repertoire of sound possibilities and techniques from which they can later draw to make musical or artistic decisions. An improvised piece or section of a piece is invented spontaneously. There is free and structured improv. Free improv is when children are encouraged to experiment with possibilities on an instrument, where structured improv is where the students are guided by the teacher, but they are still able to express themselves creatively. An example of this is to have a word bank on the board of words and have them improv, trying to sound like them. I didn't have any improv experience when I was younger, and this led to me being kind of a perfectionist on the ways of how the music has to be, as opposed to being very creative with my music. Composition differs from improvisation in that it involves the opportunity for crafting a piece. It is not instantaneous. Composing is highly regarded for what it contributes to children's musical and cognitive growth, but very few teachers actually choose to spend the time it takes to have children compose. Though composing is a creative process, the teacher has several roles in setting the climate and parameters for composing. The teacher's role is to create space in the room for groups and/or individuals to work, decide what sound sources will be available, decide whether students will work individually or in small groups, decide the amount of time students will have to work on their assignment and the limitations of the composition, and give the composition a problem or problems to be solved. The teacher also has to establish a means of quickly getting the attention of all the students. And most importantly, the teacher has to communicate to students that they will be present to answer questions and help with resources, but that they will not interfere in the student's composition process. A way to formatively assess composition and creativity would be to ask questions that make suggestions for improvement but are not too directive to the students. An example of this would be, how well did the composition meet the requirements of the assignment? Did you revise? What did you change? How did you change it? Did you hear music inside your head? When and how did this happen? Questions like this will help guide their knowledge and help them self-assess without the teacher diminishing their creativity. An example of a summative assessment in composition would be to keep a written record of the student progress. Compositions can be assessed many ways: on qualities of musical features, general style and effectiveness, originality,
A word
and
that is in
performance
the word
directions.
bank.
Also, assessment can record student growth in attitudes, commitment, interpretation, confidence, and discretion. The Science of Babies. This documentary focused on babies, their development, and how human children are different than animals and are unique in their own way. Babies come into the world vulnerable, and they have the ability to transform from very vulnerable to very capable. Most four-legged animals can walk right after birth, but humans who are two-legged take more time to walk. This is primarily because our brains grow at a surprisingly fast rate. Babies' heads are super heavy, which is why it takes 3 months for the baby to finally be able to lift their head. Babies learn from their environment. This is something that all other animals don't have the capability of doing. They also, from their second day of life, have a set of reflexes that help them survive. These include holding our breath underwater. A brush on the cheek will lead a baby to suck. A touch on the palm will lead to a tight grasp. A startle causes the baby to throw out his arms and legs. And babies are pre-programmed to walk, and in water it reappears because the muscles aren't strong enough in the legs.
English language learners are the fastest growing segment of the student population.
There are many myths about ELL students. Myth number 1. Children learn languages faster than adults.
Though many people believe the opposite, it takes more time for children to learn a language than for adults to.
Myth number 2. All ELLs have disabilities.
A student not being able to speak English does not make them less smart than those who can speak English.
Myth number 3. When an ELL can speak English fluently, they've mastered it.
As someone who grew up in an English-speaking country and lives with 2 English-speaking parents, I still haven't mastered the language. So children, even if the ELL students seem like they know the language, they still haven't mastered it.
Stages of second language learning. The pre-production stage takes 0 to 6 months, and it is when the child is taking in new information and listening. They also imitate what other children do in class, pretending to understand. and an outgoing child may use a lot of body gestures, which may be misinterpreted as physical aggression. The early production phase takes from 6 months to a year. In this phase, the child begins using words and phrases that are important in the classroom, such as stop it, I'm next, and bathroom. But the child is not sure of what constitutes a single word in English. The next stage is speech emergence, which takes 1 to 3 years. In this stage, children may leave out plurals and past tense, and their comprehension will exceed their ability to produce the language. They may use grammatical forms that are literal translations from their first language, and they get most of the vocabulary, but may generalize meaning. For example, they may know that a chair is a chair, but not that a recliner is also a chair. Intermediate fluency stage takes 3 to 5 years. This is where the child develops excellent comprehension and makes few grammatical errors. The last stage takes 5 to 7 years to accomplish. It is the advanced fluency stage in which the child has near native speech. BICS stands for Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills. These skills are language skills that are needed in a social situation. They are context embedded, and they are basic phrases used to get your point across. And language required is not specialized. Students may pick up basic interpersonal communication skills by observing others' reactions. CALP stands for Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, and it refers to formal academic learning. That is listening, speaking, and writing about subject area, and it takes 5 to 7 years. If a child has no prior schooling or support, it may take longer. It may take 7 to 10 years. And it isn't just an understanding of content area vocabulary. Calc includes comparing, synthesizing, evaluating, and inferring, and it is context reduced. Proficiency in CALP is reduced because there's less face-to-face interaction, no nonverbal cues, the need for cultural and linguistic knowledge, literacy demands are high, and academic language is often abstract. Other tips for teaching ELL students.
Allow them extra time to answer questions and accept one-word answers. Never ask them, "Do you understand?" Speak in a clear, concise manner at a slightly slower pace, using short, simple sentences and high-frequency words.